Midwest. So I drove a car from New Jersey to the Chicago area with one or two people. We split up the gas. And when it came time to go back home, I was driving on my own. The other people were not coming back at that time. So I had to drive home, and I had no sense of direction because I still was basically a New Yorker in northern New Jersey, and I just had no concept of geography. New Yorkers are very New York centric, and we basically would have that concept that the world is basically 6th Avenue, 7th Avenue, 8th Avenue, and China. And that was basically the universe. So it was a Friday that I was driving back, and I had to be home in time for sunset, Sabbath, Shabbat. And so I completely messed up on the way I timed it. I thought the drive would be half the amount of time it was from Chicago to New Jersey. The drive, even by speeding, would be about 12 hours. And if I recall correctly, and I allowed myself 6 hours, and there was just no way I was going to do it. And I looked at a map very quickly, and I thought Ohio was going to be real quick to go through, because on the map, with my two fingers, I could go right across. It's like Ohio never ended. It's like a country. And I'm a New Yorker again. Okay, I live in Southern California for 30 years, but I was a New Yorker at that point. So I'm driving, I'm going from Chicago, Illinois, and then I guess it was the next state, Ohio. I don't remember. I think maybe it wasn't long till I was in Ohio, and now I've got to get to Pennsylvania, and then I'll get to Jersey. And I just kind of figured Ohio's going to be an hour, and then Pennsylvania be an hour, and then I'm in Jersey. And I've done it in 3-4 hours. And so Ohio never ended. It's like the song didn't never end. It was just more and more and more Ohio. And I started realizing, so first of all, in those days, they didn't have GPS, and you had to work off a AAA map. So since I was driving in Ohio for hours upon hours, by the time I finally got through Ohio, I knew the whole state inside out. I knew Cincinnati's on the bottom, and Cleveland is towards the top, and Columbus is in the middle. And I got to know Ohio really good. I suddenly understood like how the same state could have the Cincinnati Reds in the National League and Cleveland in the American League. And it's like suddenly made sense, like they're not next door to each other. So anyway, I now had to, the real problem is I'm not allowed to drive. Orthodox Jews are not allowed to drive on Shabbat, on the Sabbath. And the Sabbath was going to start at sunset. No way was I going to hit Jersey in time. So I had to start rethinking my entire game plan. I got to figure out where I'm going to get off and stay at a hotel or a motel or something. And so I kind of made a decision for myself. If I get finished with Ohio by such and such time, I'm going to try to find a place in Pennsylvania. And I'm not even going to dream of getting through Pennsylvania before Shabbat. But the question is, where in Pennsylvania? And so I used like my Major League Baseball I have like the Dov Fischer Major League Baseball theory. That is, if you don't know where to find an Orthodox Jewish community, if they have a team in the American League or the National League of Baseball, there will be an Orthodox Jewish community in that city. That doesn't work for hockey. Orthodox Jews, a lot of them don't know from hockey. Doesn't work for any other sport, but it works for baseball. Jews live near baseball, even the ones that don't follow it. It just attracts the Jews. Okay. So I'm asking myself as a baseball fan, as I'm planning, if I ever get through Ohio, where in Pennsylvania is there baseball? And I know there's the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Philadelphia Phillies. So now the only question is, which one is closer to Ohio, Philadelphia or Pittsburgh? And it sounds ridiculous now, but at the time I had no clue. And so I finally get to the turnpike or whatever they call it, and I'm asking the person, I've already decided I'm never going to get home in time. And I'm asking the person, which comes first between here, like I'm on the border of Ohio and Pennsylvania, which comes first before New Jersey? Philadelphia or Pittsburgh? And she says to me, "Are you from New York?" And I said, "Yeah." She says, "Figures." So she says, like, Pittsburgh comes first. So in my mind, okay, as soon as I hit Pittsburgh on the 80 freeway or the 80 highway, the 80 interstate, I'm going to stop in Pittsburgh and I'm going to find a place to be. So, but of course, Pittsburgh is not just one exit. So when I finally hit like Pittsburgh, I have to figure out what exit. I have no exit. Where am I going to find Orthodox Jews in Pittsburgh? I'm sure there will be, because the Pittsburgh Pirates are playing in Pittsburgh. So I figure I don't know which exit to get off. There's no Siri or Alexa or GPS. Because it's 30 years ago, I just know I'll get off in the center of the city. And sure enough, there's an exit called City Center. So I get off the exit at City Center, get off the ramp, and after one block, I'm in the middle of a red light district with all these XXX movie theaters. It's like the titles. As a rabbi, I can't even tell you the names of the movies. I remember those names. Boy, do I remember. But you can't even forget about describing the movies. I can't even tell you, like, if you think Debbie did Dallas, what they had Debbie doing in Pittsburgh. So anyway, all I know is I'm in the middle of this thing. I'm wearing a yarmulke and I'm wearing my suit and tie. I'm a rabbi. And sure enough, it is a real red light district with a lot of prostitutes. It's middle of the day, no shame. It's shameful even at night, but I mean, middle of the day, and there's like 4 police cars parked right on the main street. Just, I guess, if with his prostitutes and with his XXX movies, there's crime. Anyway, so I pull my car right near the cops because I need to figure out where to go for Shabbos. And the thing is, Orthodox Jews, a lot of people don't know this, a big mitzvah, a big Torah commandment in Judaism is to welcome people to your home. Or it's called Hachnasat Orchim, welcoming the wayfarers. It goes back to our father, Patriarch Abraham, who welcomed the wayfarers who were walking by, invited them to his tent, offered them a meal. So I go to the cop, one of the police cars, and, excuse me, I need some direction here. And they see me with my yarmulke, and they say, "What do you need direction?" With me standing in the middle of this, there's like 9 prostitutes. So anyway, I think I'm in the wrong place. Boy, you're in the wrong place. So I said, "Look, here's the story. Orthodox Jew, Orthodox rabbi." I told him my whole story about Sabbath. I got to get to a place before the Sabbath starts. And I think if you could direct me to where the Orthodox Jews of Pittsburgh live, I'll be able to find a house that takes me in. They're just going to take you in, Rabbi. Oh yeah, they'll take me in. I'll find Orthodox Jews do that for each other. They will. I have no doubt I'll find someone to take me in, but I got to find a community where the Orthodox Jews live. Do you by any chance know? And like what they each have their names on their thing. One is like Officer Spinuzzi, and the other one is Officer O'Hara. And sure enough, they look at each other, the Irish and the Italian cop, when I asked them, "Do you know where the Jews live?" And at the same moment, they both say Squirrel Hill. They knew exactly that's where the Jews of Pittsburgh live, Squirrel Hill. So they say to me, "Listen, Rabbi, get in the car. I don't think you're going to be able to find someone that's just going to take in your house. But if you do, we'd like to see this happen. We'd find that interesting. Just follow us." So I get in my car. It's like a little Mazda GLC, small little nothing. And I had no money in those days. And not that I'm so rich now. And anyway, I'm going to follow them. I had no idea what they had in mind. They turn on the siren to get all traffic out of the way, and they start driving 90 miles an hour, like cops try, like if there's a murder in progress. And I'm a simple guy. I'm not like a teenager that likes to play, Need for Speed, and half the time you crash your car and everything. And I'm desperately trying to stay behind these 2 cops. They're going 90 miles an hour. For all I know, it's one way the wrong way. I'm terrified. I'm scared like crazy. I admit it. And I'm also, what if they stop short? And so anyway, this goes on for like 20 terrifying minutes. Sure enough, the siren goes off. They park. I park behind them. I'm now in Squirrel Hill, and the whole neighborhood is out to see, because they're like a nice, quiet Orthodox. If you live in an Orthodox Jewish community, there's never any crime except what outsiders might do. Orthodox Jews, you just don't have you don't have cop cars in an Orthodox neighborhood. So anyway, everybody's out. What's going on? And as they're all standing at their porches looking, they see the cop gets out of the car and opens the door for me, which is very nice. But he was like treating me nice. And it gave everybody there the impression like the chief rabbi of Israel is here, or the chief rabbi of Brazil or whatever. But like the cops with the sirens to Squirrel Hill, opening the door for a rabbi. So anyway, I get up and the cop says, now, Rabbi, who's going to take you into a house? It's 4:30, 5 o'clock. You said your Sabbath is starting in 30 minutes. Who's going to put you in a house in the next 30 minutes? I said, just stand here and watch. We Jews have an international symbol, sort of like Motel 6 or the Ramada or something like that. What's the symbol? Jews on the right doorpost. We put this little thing, a little hanging thing on the upper third of the doorpost. And if it's pointing in towards the front door, that means they take guests. So it happens to be, according to Jewish law, the mezuzah always points in. So anyway, and he said, what is this? I never saw this in my life, the cop says. I said, it's called a mezuzah. So he says, all right, let's see. So O'Hara and Spinizzo start walking up the street. Rabbi, I see a mestizo over here. I said, it's not a mestizo, it's a mezuzah. Anyway, I come to the door, knock on the door. The two cops are behind me. She opens the door. Can you imagine? You're in your whole life, you're 50, you're 60 years old. A cop never in your life knocked on your door. Suddenly, two cops are there in uniform with a guy with a yarmulke standing with them. It's like, what is it? What is this? And I opened the door and I said, look, it's a long story, but bottom line, I need a place to stay for Shabbos. And they say, if you came a half an hour ago, we would have had a place for you, but we just took somebody in. And the cops are looking at each other, I can't believe it. So I said, is there anybody else? So she says, I'm making up the name. She says, try the Goldsteins two doors down. So we go 2 doors down, same deal. And the Goldsteins took me in for Shabbos. I ended up sleeping over there, and they had a bedroom. They quickly put the bedroom together for me. They had me for their Friday night dinner, their Shabbat lunch. It's called Achnasas Orchim, or Achnasat Orchim, welcoming the visitors, welcoming the wayfarers. And that's how I spent my Shabbos in Pittsburgh. And it has nothing to do with Ohio, but it has everything to do with Ohio. Because if Ohio would have been the size of Jersey, I would have been home in time for Shabbos. So anyway, let's learn about the book of Samuel, Shmuel. Thank you for being with me now. And we're now back. We had about a 2-week break because last week was Purim. I took out the time both on Sunday and today to tell some stories, get us back into action. Now we're in action. Let's go. Lights, camera, action. We were in Shmuel, 1 Samuel chapter 8. And the nation of Israel are looking at an elderly Shmuel. He's not that old, we said. He will die at age 52. God, we learned, miraculously made him seem much older than he was. And we discussed that in great deal the last 2 weeks, last 2 classes. So the people saw it was time to replace Shmuel, and they felt that his 2 sons, Yoel and Aviah, did not maintain the same high standards that he, Shmuel, Samuel, did as a holy prophet. And so they said, we want to have a king. And last class, 2 weeks ago, we went through some of that text, and we were doing some of the laws of kings. Let's go back to it, refresh our memories, and go forward. Here we go. They said to him, you've gotten old, and your sons haven't followed in your footsteps. And therefore, critical words, Sima lanu melech l'shoftenu kechol hagoyim. Appoint for us a king that he should govern us like all other nations. What we saw last class is that the Torah actually commands. In the Torah, in Sefer Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, when the people come into the land of Israel, there will come a time that they will want a king, and you should appoint a king. A king should be appointed for them. Moses won't be in the land of Israel to do it, but a king should be appointed. So in other words, it is a Torah commandment to have a king. And therefore, on the surface, there's nothing wrong with Jews asking, it's time for us to have a king. But the problem is the way they asked for the king. If they would have said, we're now in Israel, you have been a great leader as our prophet. Now that your tenure is moving towards its conclusion, we'd like to fulfill the Torah commandment and have a king. If they said it that way, it would have been fine. But instead, what they said is, we want to be like all the nations. Kechol hagoyim. The word goy actually is not a pejorative negative term. The word goy means non-Jew, means nation. And in fact, Israel, the nation of Israel, also very often in the Torah are referred to as a goy, as a nation, the nation of Israel, goy kadosh, a holy nation. It's a misconception spread by anti-Semites that Jews have a pejorative term for non-Jews, goy. It's basically, goy is single syllable, and non-Jew is double syllable, Gentile is double syllable. So like everything else, when people speak, they tend to go for the shortest word possible. If you have somebody, if there's someone named David, in the first instance, they'll call him Dave. Someone called Robert, they'll call him Rob or Bob. Someone William, they'll call Bill. It's just natural. So they say we want to be like all the other guys. We're a goy, a nation, and we want to be like all the other guys, all the other nations. And that was their sin. They should have said, we want to have a king the way God commanded in the Torah, to lead us in battle and to lead us in religious, spiritual awakening, rather than simply, we want to be modeled like all the others. This was very displeasing to Shmuel, the way they asked for a king. And he prayed to God, what should I do? He prayed to the Lord, I need guidance. Should I appoint a king for them? And if so, who? Vayomer Hashem Shmuel, and the Lord said to Samuel, Shma b'kol ha'am, hearken, heed what they're asking for. L'chol asher yomru elecha, for everything they're asking, ki lo otcha ma'asu, it's not you they're contemning, you for whom they have contempt, rather ki oti ma'asu, rather it is I, God, whom they're rejecting as their king. So that's how it's been. So do what they want, Shma b'kol am, do what they're asking for, but warn them what they're getting into. Just warn them solemnly, tell them about the practices any king will do. And again, we learned some of this 2 weeks ago. I'm refreshing your memory as we review it and get back into where we are. And so he warned them. And he said, listen, this is what you're asking for. If you want a king and you get a king, here's what's going to happen. He's going to take your sons to serve in his army, and Som lo b'merkavto, he's going to put them in he's going to have them in his chariots, and he's going to have them as his horsemen, and he's going to have some of them running in front of him, and he's going to make them officers. He's going to pull them out of your house. If you have plans for your kids to be doctors, he's going to pull them out. Obviously, they didn't have doctors like that in those days. He's going to pull your sons out, and once he doesn't conscript into the army, he'll have them working in his fields as his farmers. Those who know blacksmithing, smiths, he'll have them making weapons for him. He's going to take your daughters also. You want to wait till they grow up and then you marry them to a nice boy? Not going to happen. He's going to take your daughters and he's going to draft them, conscript them into his palace service. L'rakachot, they'll be perfumers. They're going to make perfumes, and they're going to be cooks for him in his kitchen. Think of Downton Abbey or Upstairs, Downstairs. They're going to be downstairs. They'll be his cooks, and they'll be his bakers. He's going to take your fields. As a king, he can take your fields. He's going to take your vineyards. He's going to take your olive groves. He's going to give it to not only for himself, If he has favored servants whom he wants to repay for their loyal service, he'll take your fields and give it to them. He'll take your property. He's going to take your grain. He's going to take some of you. He'll take 1/10 of your grain. He'll take 1/10 of your olives. And he'll give it to his eunuchs, to people that he has working for him. You have servants at home, he's liable to take your servants. You have maids, whatever. He'll take your stuff. He'll take your animals. You have donkeys, he'll take them. He'll take 1/10 of your sheep. He'll take, that's what you're going to get if you got a king. You sure you want a king? I mean, here you're saying you want a king. You're going to cry to God, save us from this king. And the people, they weren't impressed by the warnings. We want a king. We must have a king. We want to be like all other nations. Ke'chol hagoyim. He should rule over us, go ahead, fight our battles. And so Shmuel reported it to God, and God said, heed their demands, appoint a king for them. That's it. Chapter 8, let's learn more about the king. It's a little more than what we covered last time because we're moving forward. Let's look at Rambam. To remind you, Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimonides, is considered to have been one of the 2 or 3 or 4 greatest minds in Jewish history, M-I-N-D, greatest minds in Jewish history. He was a philosopher, a theologian, a rabbi, and an incredible surgeon, doctor. He studied Torah. He began in Spain, I believe in Cordova. And then when Cordova turned murderous towards Jews, he and much of the community fled to Egypt. Jews were not supposed to go back to Egypt, according to the Torah, but this was life or death. And there's a whole nother discussion about that. We could have another time. And I wrote it about a few weeks ago in my weekly Torah portion, that the law in Judaism is, rabbis say that when the Torah says you're not supposed to move back to Egypt, you should not leave Israel, living in Israel, to go to Egypt. But to leave Spain to go to Egypt, there are many rabbinic opinions that was okay. Anyway, Rambam did it. And he lived in Egypt. And the deal was he sat and learned Torah all day and all night. And he had an incredible mind. And his brother David ben Maimon, supported him. David ben Maimon was a very successful sea merchant. He traded on the waters. He traveled on his ships to foreign ports, sold and bought, was very successful. And with his wealth, he made a deal with his brother. I'll earn money for the 2 of us, and you learn Torah for the 2 of us. And so Rambam devoted double time to learning Torah. In doing so, Rambam reached the point that he came to the conclusion that there was there would be a great value if somebody would prepare a code of Jewish law. That is to say, not to make up new laws, but there are laws throughout the Torah, the Bible. And there are some laws in the book of Yeshaya, Isaiah. And then there are lots and lots of laws in the Talmud, but they're not according to subject. They're kind of like they're very kind of spread all over the place. And the Talmud is structured in a way that there's a lot of discussion before they get to the bottom line of the law. If you want to just look up a law, you can't do that in the Talmud. You can't just open up the tractate about the laws of Passover and find an answer to a question about matzah. You have to go through pages of debates and discussions in Aramaic to get to the bottom line, if you're even able to do it, if you know where to look and you're able to understand it and you're able to figure it out. So Rambam decided it would be an incredible aid and tool for learning for Jewish people if someone would gather together each and every law that appears in the entire Babylonian Talmud, which is the equivalent of, let's say, 80 volume. Imagine an 80-volume encyclopedia. If someone would go through every single word of that 80-volume encyclopedia, let's say, and the Torah, get every single law out of there that appears, and then rearrange it completely, overhaul it by order, by subject matter, and then publish it as a book or as a series of books. And that's what Rambam did. It's called Mishneh Torah, and it's a code of Jewish law. He did not make up a single law. It's not like he added something. He just codified it. And he did it in the 1100s. And here we are in the year 2300. 1200 years later, it remains one of the 2 or 3 most important works that were ever put together on Jewish law. It was updated one time in the 1500s by Rabbi Yosef Karo, who wanted to update it. There had been a passage of 400 years. 1500s, they were now living in modern times with modern issues that they didn't have in the 1100s. And so he prepared the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. And ever since then, there's never been another codification of Jewish law like that. There simply have been commentaries and other ways that it's updated. For now, we'll leave it at that. So I have for you, Rambam took and put together, we don't have time for all of it, but some of it I'll do with you, laws regarding the kings of Israel. What does it mean to be a king? So we had Shmuel, Prophet Samuel, warning them what a king is going to be. And so let's take a quick look at what Rambam says on the subject of the Mishneh Torah, kings and wars, the laws of kings and wars. So he points out Israel was commanded to fulfill 3 commandments, mitzvot, when they enter the land of Israel. The first one, to choose a king. As the Torah says, appoint a king over yourselves. It says it in Deuteronomy, Sefer Devarim, Perek Yud Zayin, chapter 17, Pasuk Tetvav, verse 15. Som tasim alecha melech asher yivchar Hashem elokecha bo. You should set a king over yourself, someone God selects. So when you're ready to get a king, you don't name the king. God will name the king. Lo tuchal latet alecha ish nachri asher lo achichahu. And we learned last time that the king has to be someone born into the Jewish nation, into the Jewish people. And that's where these laws begin in chapter 1. And we went over chapter 1, a few highlights, so I won't do that again. In chapter 2, the king must be treated with enormous respect. And we covered some of this, and I'm going to go beyond it now. You have to give him fear. You must be terrified of the king. Belev kol adam. It must be in every single person's heart. When you look at Queen Elizabeth, who just passed away, Queen Elizabeth, they loved Queen Elizabeth, but they did not fear Queen Elizabeth, and there's no reason for they should have. She wasn't like bipolar or schizoid that we know of. She seems to have been very, very nice and friendly, and she was all things to all Brits. So they loved her. And we saw that a few months before she died, the national outpouring of love for her. And the same thing with her, with the Queen Mum and World War II, and they loved these people. But when you go back to the Middle Ages, those kings used to chop people's heads off. Henry VIII, if you married Henry VIII and you didn't give him a boy, chop your head off. Next one, he chopped off a whole bunch of heads. All of these people, and every once in a while, the kings themselves got their heads chopped off. And Sir Thomas More, if you ever see any of those really, I mean, the one good thing you could say for all the heads they chopped off is some really good movies came out of it. A Man for All Seasons, Beckett, every single guy whose head got chopped off, they really made like a really good movie. So as a result of that, people really feared the king of Egypt, him too, the king of England, and the king of France, Charlemagne. You don't mess around with Charlemagne. Louis XVI didn't do so well, so they chopped off his head. But Louis XIV, you don't mess around with Louis XIV. So I'm mentioning them to understand the king of Israel was not like Queen Elizabeth II or Prince Charles, now King Charles. These were serious. You treated them with enormous respect and honor, not only love, but you were terrified of them because, as we're going to see, they had the authority by the Torah to have anyone killed. If they passed a judgment, no trial, no jury. If the king declared someone is to be executed, he had that authority. They didn't do it like in England. They didn't go around executing people left and right, but they had that authority. So you didn't mess around with the king. You didn't make jokes of the king. In the United States, everybody mocks the president. Biden, Trump, the whole bunch of them. Everybody mocks the president. They stand-up comedy. It's been going on forever. You don't make fun of the king of Israel. In modern day Israel, they do it to their prime ministers because they don't have the power of life and death. Let's continue, because this is what Samuel is warning them. You don't know what you're getting involved in. When you say you want a king, he's going to do all the things I just read to you from chapter 8. You could have him killed. In little ways, for example, you're not allowed to ride in a king's horse, not allowed to sit on his throne. Let's say he's not there and you're the maid and you're dusting, and you decide, yeah, let me see what it feels like. You dare. You're not allowed to use or touch any of his weapons or anything that belongs to him. You're not allowed to put on his clothes. His wife, when he dies, no one else is allowed to marry that widow. And a king of Israel is not allowed to marry the widow of a previous king. And the king has to bear himself with enormous dignity. We learned last time. He has to get a haircut every day so that with little itsy bitsy grows, he has to always look clean cut, has to wear the best clothing. And then when people walk in his presence, you have to treat him with the utmost respect. And so it says, Hamelech mistaper kol yom. Umitaken atzmo mitga'ebel malbushin ne'imim forim, like we learned last time. As I just said, he has to get the haircut. He has to wear the great clothing. Okay. Hiderach shechalach lo, hakatuv hakavod hagadol, v'chayev hakol b'chvodo. Rambam says, just as the Torah requires, you must give utmost honor and respect to the king. Kach tzivahu liot libo b'krabo shafal b'chalal. In the same way, and it's a hard balancing act, the Torah requires of him that he be humble and modest. So it's very tricky. He has to maintain personal modesty and never think of himself as all that haughty and all that high. And yet he has to never forget that he's the king. That's quite a challenge. This is why we make such a big thing about King David, because King David basically pulled it off, and a few others did. King Chizkiyahu, Hezekiah, a few others. Very hard. Lo yinhag gasut lev b'Yisrael yoter midai. He should not be more haughty than necessary. It's a tricky thing, right? If you're too modest, then you're too much of a pushover. You can't get away with it as the king. They'll step all over you. So he's got to maintain a certain aura of invincibility, but when he looks in the mirror, he can't fool himself. He's got to know the whole deal. He's got to treat people respectfully. Yachus al kavod katan shebektanim. He should have mercy and be kind, even to the most insignificant, so to speak, person in his kingdom. La'olam yitnaheg ba'anavah yetera. He should always publicly comport himself with extreme modesty. Ein lanu gadol mi Moshe Rabbeinu. Hu omer v'nachnu malo aleinu tulunotechem. Rambam cites as an example Moses, who, as great as he was, the undisputed leader. There was a brief dispute, and that ended up quite clearly showing he's the boss. But he himself comported himself with the utmost humility. And so the king must put up with them. Yispol torchamu masa'amu tulunotam v'kitzpam. He's got to put up with them. Chapter 3. We learned briefly he's supposed to write a Torah scroll, and it goes with him wherever he goes. We learned that last time. He's not allowed to have more than too many wives. And we were surprised to learn that he's allowed to have, when the Torah says he should not have too many wives, he's allowed to have, that means no more than 18. It was a different time, a different place. Kings had harems, and kings were very wealthy and they could afford it. And they could have a lot of children that way and other things. But even the king, so you might think he could have unlimited. So there's a limit of 18. And he has to be careful with whom he gets involved. And we did that last time. He's not supposed to have too many horses, not supposed to catch too much money. A king is never allowed to get drunk. Forbidden to drink wine to the point of intoxication. If you've seen movies of like the Henrys, Henry VIII and Henry VII and Henry, Henry's 1 to 8. I don't know how many they had after 8. And all the Georges and the Philips and whatever they had. So these kings all get drunk. It's always a major part of every one of these movies. The king at the big royal table and everybody's drinking themselves into shichrit, into drunkenness. Shikr. A shikr is a person who gets drunk. So what's he supposed to do? Eliyah osek b'Torah, u'b'tzarchei Yisrael b'yom v'layla. Rather, the king's job is to spend his time studying Torah and taking care of the needs of the nation. So rather than drinking and doing that kind of stuff, he's supposed to be on the ball. And when he has spare time, learning Torah. It's amazing. It's really amazing what the king is supposed to, and that's again how King David spends so much of his time writing 150 Psalms. The book of Tehillim, Psalms, or 150 poems that he wrote. Most of them were written by him, praising God. That's what a king does. David was like that. Okay. And so it continues. Now, here's something I told you. Kol hamored b'melech Yisrael, yesh lemelech reshut l'horgo. Anyone who rebels against the king of Israel may be executed. Even if the king orders one of the people to go to a particular place and the latter refuses, or he orders him not to leave his house and he goes out, the offender is liable to be put to death. That's the authority of the king. Similarly, anyone who embarrasses or shames the king may be executed. And so it goes on to that. And I'm not going to go into all the other details. I wanted to give you the basic sense. Just one last section, because this immediately quotes into chapter 8. The king is allowed to levy taxes. That's what Shmuel was warning them. He's going to be taxing you on everything, and it is forbidden to avoid paying the tax. If someone doesn't pay the tax, the king has the right to order that his property be seized or he be killed. That's what they were warned. Shmuel said it in chapter 8. You will be servants to the king. And so, for example, it says that he may send throughout the kingdom to find valiant men and men of war and employ them as soldiers, exactly as Shmuel warned them. He appoint them as bodyguards and footmen to run before him, just as Shmuel warned them. He may take the choicest of them to be his servants, just as Shmuel warned them. He may take all those that are necessary for him. He may take all the animals in the field and the servants and maids that he wants. He has to pay them a salary, or he has to give them food, take care of them, but he can take everybody he wants, just as Shmuel warned them. And in the same way, he may force those who are fit to serve as officers. He may take people's fields, olive groves, and vineyards. He may take it for his servants. He does have to pay, sort of like in the United States, the Fifth Amendment includes the right of eminent domain. The government is allowed to seize your property as long as they pay a fair and reasonable price. But he's allowed to take your stuff. And so it goes. If he does, anybody who's executed by the king's treasury receives all of that person's property. Well, treasures belonging to the kings of the kingdoms which he conquers become the property of the king. Okay, you got the idea. So this is what Shmuel warned them. And now God says, if that's what they insist on, give it to them. Here we go. Chapter 9. Vayhi ish mi Benjamin. There was a guy who happened around this time who lived among the tribe of Benjamin. The land of Israel is divided, just as the United States is divided into 50 states. We talked earlier tonight about Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And these have real boundaries. We literally, I was telling you about leaving Ohio, going to Pennsylvania, the boundary. Israel is divided, biblical Israel, into 12, call it states or commonwealths or provinces, the 12 tribes. The tribe of Levi did not get territory. They were assigned to be in Jerusalem and work for the needs of the Holy Temple. So that leaves 11 tribes. But the tribe of Joseph actually became 2 tribes. Joseph's children, Manasseh and Ephraim, Manasseh and Ephraim. So there were 12 tribes, plus the 13th Levi that did not have land. In the tribe of Benjamin, which includes the area that includes Jerusalem, by the way. So in the tribe of Benjamin, there was a man. His name was, his name was Kish. His name was Kish. And they tell you his family line going back, he was an Ish Yemini. He was a Benjaminite. And he had a son named Saul. Velo, Haya ben Shmuel Shaul, Bachur V'tov, a fine young man. Actually, 80 Mibnei Yisrael Tov Mimenu. There was no one in all of Israel more strikingly handsome and higher, taller stature than this young fellow, Saul of Benjamin. Mishichmo v'mala gavoa mikolam. From his shoulders and up, he was like a head taller than every other person. So not as a pun, but literally, you would look up to him. And this was purposeful. God was choosing, as the king of Israel, someone who had that height. I don't know if you've ever met celebrities or elected officials like senators. I've met a few. And I won't say this is universal, but it's striking to me that a great deal of celebrities and elected officials are taller than average. Not everybody. And when you actually see something on TV, where it's the president or U.S. senator or when you see someone shorter than the others, and there are some, usually a woman, women are shorter than men, and if you have a little bit shorter woman, a congressman or whatever, it's really striking. It's like someone watching would think, my, that person looks short. There's something psychologically for people. When you meet taller people, you look up to them. I mean, maybe that's where that expression comes from. It's very subtle, but it's a thing. Now, what happened was this strapping young man, Saul, the son of Kish, his father had donkeys, asses, that got lost. They went out in the fields and they got lost. Vatovadna ha'atonot le'ikish avi Shaul, vayomer Kish, and basically Kish, the father, said to Shaul, Saul, he said, take one of your friends or one of our young men that work here, and would you please go looking for my donkeys? And so they started looking for the donkeys. They couldn't find them. They went through the mounts of Ephraim, the hill country of Ephraim, and they went all over the place. V'lo matzo, they couldn't find them. Vayavru hit this place and that place, and they couldn't find them. They traversed the entire territory of Benjamin, and they couldn't find the missing donkeys. This is Saul and his companion. So it talks about they went this way, that way, this way, that way. And finally, Shaul Amar Lanaro, Saul said to his colleague, or the servant, the young man, his young servant, L'chavin Ashuva, let's go back home. We're not going to find it because if we don't go back home soon, Dad is going to worry about what happened to us. Pretty soon, Father's going to stop worrying about the asses and begin worrying about us. As he was about to go, the servant, I've been referring to that person as Shaul's colleague. A better translation is a servant, a na'ar, someone junior to him, said to Saul, before we go back to your father, I think we've wandered so far afield looking for these donkeys or asses, whatever. We've actually come to a city that's famous. There's a holy man in this city. There's a man of God in this town. Ha'ish nichbad kol asher daber bo yavo. And everybody knows this man, very highly esteemed. Maybe before we go back to your father, we're already this far. Let's just go look this guy up. Ata nelchasham ulaya gidlanu etakeno asher alachnu le. Maybe we could find that wise man, and he can tell us, like maybe he could direct us which way to find the asses, or should we go home now? So Shaul said, okay, let's do it. So the thing is, if we go, we should bring him something. You don't just go to a holy man without a gift. So, but we've kind of used up all of our food, wandering so long and so distant. What should we do? I don't know. So the servant responded. He named him Sabi Adi Reva Shekel Kesef. I happen to have a quarter shekel of silver. So I'll give him that. I mean, it might be nicer to give him like a dried fruit collection from Harry and David, but I'll give him a quarter shekel of silver. At least we'll give him something. And by the way, that's done. Every so often, there are certain, even nowadays, certain rabbis that are regarded as very, very holy, not on the level of prophets, not on that level we're talking about. We're not talking about Shmuel HaNavi's, Prophet Samuel, but there are certain Hasidic rabbis whose followers really swear by them and really believe that they're just not only rabbis like, let's say, me, but that they're so holy that they're almost like prophetic. Most of us Orthodox rabbis don't really, we're not big on that. That doesn't really speak to us. There are extraordinarily great rabbis in our generation that people like me revere and recognize. But we don't normally think of those rabbis as people you go to for prophecy, or to give you or to make like a blessing happen, that a miracle is going to happen. We will go to such a rabbi with a question. And once in a while, we do go to such a rabbi and ask them for a blessing, but not normally. However, in the Hasidic world, it's a thing where some of these rabbis, and what you do is you make an appointment when the rabbi is visiting your city, because they'll have like a rabbi from Israel will go to all the big cities with his large Jewish communities. And you'll find out there'll be signs in the Orthodox community. There'll be signs usually in Yiddish, because they're Hasidic and it's the Yiddish crowd that really, they're into that. There'll be signs that the rabbi so-and-so will be in town next Tuesday and Wednesday. Call this phone number for an appointment. And the idea is you make an appointment, you show up, you bring money. And when you show up, and that partly supports the rabbi's institutions, the understanding is you do not bring him a Harry and David dried fruit. You bring him some serious cash. And you give him to charity, and then he gives you a blessing. And just one more word on that. That is what made set aside the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the rabbi of Chabad. What set him aside is he was a man he passed away a number of years ago, but he lived in our generation. He was a very, very great man. The followers think he was pretty much like a prophet, and unfortunately, some of the followers think he's the Messiah. But we all agree in the Orthodox world, he was a very great man, though not a prophet, and certainly not the Messiah. So part of his greatness was, unlike almost all the other Hasidic rabbis of that stature, He was very worldly. He actually had studied at the Sorbonne in France. He had a degree in engineering. He was a very worldly and brilliant man, and I could just go on. And I'm not even one of his followers, but he was truly just extraordinary rabbi. And one of the things, really just an incredible thought, no one ever thought of. It bothered him that certain non-believers make fun of Hasidic rabbis, mocking them and saying, yeah, you're going to go see that rabbi, he's a phony, just be sure to bring a lot of cash. That's what they're all about. They're just there to get your cash, and then they'll... And he knew that there's a subgroup in the greater Jewish world of people who actually are reinforced in their contempt for Orthodox Jews, and especially Orthodox rabbis, and especially Hasidic rabbis, that they are reinforced in that contempt by the idea that you go to him, you got to give him money. Again, the reason they're taking money is they're bringing that money back to support their institutions that they run. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe did a thing. If you wanted to meet the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you had to get an appointment, not so easy. But when you got there and you got an appointment, and you'd start to go to your wallet because you understood that's what you give a Rebbe when you're going to ask him for a blessing or guidance, they would stop you. The Rebbe does not only not take money, he gives $1. Anybody that comes to the Rebbe gives $1. That when you go back home and some snide person says, so how much did it cost you? You'll tell him he wouldn't take any money. He actually gave me money. That's what the Rebbe did. He was a very great man in a lot of ways. And you see Chabads all over the place. I think they actually landed on the moon before Apollo, whatever. They probably have a Chabad house in the moon, and probably offer Trillant and Kishk every Friday night. Continue. So then the servant says, I have some money. We can give it, that could be the gift we give to the holy man. Now, in the old days, it's just in a parenthetical, the text says what we call a Navi, a prophet. In the old days, was called a ro'eh, a seer. In the old days, when a man would inquire of God, he would say, let us go to the seer, rather than let us go to the prophet. Navi hayom yikarei lefanim ro'eh. It's just parenthetical. So Shmuel, actually, in his time, was known as a ro'eh, as a seer. We know him as a prophet. Okay. So they go to see the Ish Elokim, the man of God. They go, and as they ascend to the town, they meet some young ladies who are out there drawing water. People did not have indoor plumbing, and so you had people employed to fill up the barrels with water at the well. And so they asked, Hayesh bazeh haro'eh, and that's why they had that. That's why they just had that parenthetical over here, because the text was going to quote the two young ladies or so that they're going to be asked, is there a seer? And we would not know the term, but for the parenthetical that explained that in those days a prophet was called a seer. Okay. So they asked Shaul and his servant asked the young ladies, is the seer in town? And they answered and said, Hinei lefanecha, yeah. In fact, my hair, ataki hayom bala'ir. Actually, if you want to see him, you better hurry up because he's in town today. So today there's a big feast. He's going to offer a sacrifice to God, and or he's going to make a sacrifice, and you better hurry up. So if you go there, as soon as you enter town, you'll find him. But you better hurry up right away, because there's going to be a big feast. The seer is in town, and no one will dare to eat anything until he arrives. First, he has to say the blessing on the sacrifice, on the meat, and only then can people eat it. So go up, you'll get him right away before the banquet starts. So they went up. They entered the town. Shmuel, the prophet, the seer, he sees amid the crowd of hundreds or thousands of people, he sees Shaul and the servant, V'hinei Shmuel yotzei lekratam. And Samuel breaks from the crowd and walks to the two of them. Now, the day before, God had revealed the following to Shmuel, the prophet. God said, at this time tomorrow, I will send a man to you from the territory of Benjamin, and you will anoint him to be the king of Israel. Now that the people are demanding a king, and I have told you, go ahead and do what they're asking for, but the Torah says they don't pick the king. I, God, pick the king. That's the one I'm picking. And you, as the prophet of the generation, I am assigning to anoint him. Umeshachto l'nagir al ami Yisrael. You'll give him the Mashiachut. Mashiach means anointed. Mishcha is anointment. Mashiach is the anointed. The word Messiah, whether used in Christianity to refer to Jesus, whether used in Judaism, the word Messiah is an English transliteration of Mashiach, which means the anointed one. So God told Shmuel the prophet, Samuel, you will anoint him tomorrow, and he will save my people from the Philistines. So Samuel saw Shaul and understood right away, that's the one. God said, this is the man I told you. So Shaul, that's Saul of Benjamin, sees Samuel the prophet coming his way, and Saul more rapidly approaches Samuel. That is, the young man from Benjamin approaches the prophet. And he says to Samuel, Vayomer Hagidan Ali Eze Beit Haroeh. He says, could you please tell me how I could find the seer? He doesn't know he's talking to him. Vayan Shmuel El Shaul Vayomer. Samuel responds, number one, Anochi Haroeh. I happen to be the seer. Number two, come up to the dais, the platform where we're going to eat. I'd like you to eat along with me at my table. There's going to be a massive, massive banquet. The whole city is here, and you will be my guest of honor. You can imagine what Saul is thinking. I'm a little nobody from Benjamin, looking for a donkey, looking for some asses, and all of a sudden I'm being invited to sit with the prophet of Israel, the seer. You'll eat alongside me. And then you'll stay in town today, and tomorrow morning I'll send you home, and I'll let you know anything you want to know. Oh, by the way, the donkeys that you've been looking for, those already, your father's already got them. Those donkeys, those asses that got lost 3 days ago, don't worry about them, because they already were found. There is no more effective way to convince someone you really are a prophet than when it comes and he doesn't even ask his question yet, and you already tell him, oh, by the way, the donkeys, your father's got the donkeys. So he sets them up and he says, all of Israel is yearning for you. And Saul says, I'm only a Benjaminite from the smallest tribe of Israel. Of the 13 tribes, it's like I was comparing the tribes to the states of the United States. Benjamin is like Delaware. It's like the least of states. He says, I'm from the smallest of the tribes. And among the tribes in the smallest tribe, Mishpachti Hatzira, my family is the smallest family in the smallest tribe. And I mean, Mikol Mishpachot Shiftei Ben Yamin. I mean, and we're the smallest family among the families. How could you talk to me like that? You're saying that the whole nation of Israel is yearning for me? What are you talking? I mean, with all due respect. And for whom all Israel is yearning? You got the wrong guy. Samuel took Saul and his servant, brought them to the hall, gave a place at the head of the guests at the dais. Okay, there were 30 people there. And he said to the cook, bring the portion I gave you and told you to set aside. That is to say, in preparing for the banquet, the day before, whatever, when he was telling the chef, the cook, how much to prepare for and everything, he already had told him in advance to prepare 2 extra servings. I've got 2 people on the way. They don't know it, but they're going to be eating with us. Again, now that's a prophet. So he said, bring the extra servant. The cook lifted up the thigh of the animal, the shok, the thigh of the beef, set it before Shaul, etc., etc. And Shaul ate with Shmuel that day. And then they descended from the platform to the town. And as the next day broke, and Shmuel was going to send Saul home the way he said he would, he said to him, and here's where we kind of wind up for today. He says, go out, get up, and I'll send you off, first of all. Kuma va'ashalcheka. And as they were walking to the end of town, the 2 of them together, Shmuel the prophet said to Shaul, the anointed, tell the servant to walk ahead of us. I've got something private to tell you. I don't want the servant to hear it. You stop here a moment. I will make known to you the word of God. So I'm just going to take a little itsy bitsy into the next chapter, but we're stopping here, essentially, now that we've hit 8 o'clock. Shmuel took a flask of oil, anointing oil, and poured some of it on Saul's head, anointed him, kissed him, and said, the Lord hereby anoints you the ruler over his people. Vayikach Shmuel et pach Hashemen, vayitzok al rosho vayishakehu, vayomer haloki meshachacha Hashem al nachalato l'nagid. When you leave me today, you will meet 2 men near the tomb of Rachel, in your territory, Benjamin, at Bethlehem. And they will tell you that the asses you set out to look for have been found, and that your father has stopped being concerned about the asses and is now worrying about you. So just pass on from there until you reach this place and that place, and they will greet you, and so on and so forth. And you will reach the town, you'll encounter a band of prophets, and we'll continue from there next week. Are there any comments or questions before we break today? So this was a very turning point moment. Of all the chapters we've learned today in the book of Shmuel, this was the moment where the Jewish nation went from being led by a prophet to being led by a king. They don't know yet about the king. Right now, the only ones who know are God, Shmuel the Navi, and Shaul, who's been anointed. It's their secret, but the Jewish nation is about to take a change, fulfilling a long-standing command of God in the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, to appoint a king in Israel when you get there. And this begins the story that will take us through Saul and how his dynasty cuts to an end and moves over to David and becomes the eternal, perpetual dynasty of David. Are there any comments or questions before we break? And if not, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday night. We meet Thursday nights learning about Mishnah. We're now beginning chapter 10 of the Mishnah, the laws of the Seder, actually, as covered in the Mishnah. And Sundays, we're finishing up, but we're still doing a little bit on Megillat Esther, the story of Esther in the book of Purim. Thanks again for being here, and Shabbat Shalom. Well, also that too, but see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.